This is a Heart and Hand production.
Hello everyone and welcome to Heart and Hand's coverage of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We are very excited to bring you what will be hopefully an excellent coverage of this tournament, this unique and exciting new way of the World Cup taking place. That'll be the opinion of some people, I suppose. Others may view it differently, but we trust in what we are going to be doing for you as far as our coverage is concerned. We've done it in the past, and this is going to be bigger and better than before. Over the next few days, we will be bringing you a preview of all of the groups, all 12 groups, it should be said, for this tournament, and then giving our own predictions of what we think will play out as the tournament kicks off. From there, we will give you daily roundup shows of the action that takes place, the talking points, the goals, and no doubt plenty of incidents to discuss. My name is James Forrest, here to guide you through the World Cup as best we can, and I'm delighted for the previews to be joined by two excellent guests who really have their finger on the pulse when it comes to international and the wider world of football. First of all, very much Scotland fan, the host of the Four Nations podcast, and someone who I know is very excited for the World Cup in relation to certain teams that may or may not be taking part. It's Iain Campbell.
Hello, James. Yes, very much looking forward to it. It's been a build-up, obviously, with Scotland's participation in it, that dramatic qualification last year. A very vested interest in it. Really looking forward to this expanded format, which I know we're going to go on to talk about during some of the shows, and some different connotations that are going to land there as well. But it's been quite exciting with the end of the domestic season, which, let's be fair, as Rangers fans, has not been great. Seeing all the different World Cup squads coming out as well, and seeing who goes and who misses out. And there's been some notable exceptions, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about as well during the course of the shows. But yeah, very much looking forward to it. Very much so.
Also joining us, someone who would rather watch a game in the Bulgarian second division than your Premier League nonsense. It's Zander Staff.
You are absolutely correct, James. So happy to be here. I'm very excited for everything we've got coming up for the World Cup this year. And I will say, very excited for the tournament itself. I can't wait.
48 teams. It used to be 32, and in fairness, it used to be even less than that in the past. This has never happened before, to have this many teams, to have so many making the knockout stage. To be honest, whenever we see change in football, and let's face it, we have had a lot of change in football in the past, we always go into it with a sense of trepidation. But more often than not, football finds a way of getting it right, of getting it spot on. And our hope for this summer is that once again, football will somehow make this work. Iain, 48 teams, obviously, it allows us to get an eye on, maybe some smaller nations that maybe in the past would have not had a hope in hell of being able to make it to a tournament like this. But is there a risk that, certainly in the group stage, the games, the quality, it will be a bit more diluted as a result?
It's a possibility, but I really think, the majority of people that tune into the World Cup and tune into international tournaments, the various regulating bodies have tried to streamline the qualification so that smaller nations are only playing smaller nations. And we've seen that with the Nations League format in Europe as well. But listen, these guys deserve to have a chance on the big stage. Okay, you might be looking at, I'll take Curacao and Cape Verde as examples as well. Very small nations, never qualified for a major tournament. Obviously former historic European colonies as well. So a lot of ties to Portugal for Cape Verde and a lot of ties to the Netherlands for Curacao. And they've obviously sourced quite a lot of their players from there as well through obviously parental and grandparental heritage. But listen, see, at the end of the day, they're going to bring something different to the tournament, and I think that's really important for me, just in terms of the kind of colour that's brought, the different, we're going to see so many different nationalities at the tournament as well, and that's something we always love to see. Listen, we're proponents of the game, we all love the game. These nations are entitled like anyone else to go and compete. We've seen the dilution of competition to a certain extent within the European competitions, very much so for, I'll go off on a slight tangent, but you look at the European competitions just now as they are, James, we're going to struggle as a club, Rangers, to dine at the top table again. I think that's pretty evident. To see a world competition like this, international competition, the competition, allowing teams like Cape Verde, like Curacao, teams like the DR Congo as well. So these are teams that don't very often qualify, to have that opportunity. I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. When we watch it, the World Cup, when you look at the group stages, it's always going to be games where they're going to be pretty one-sided. It's really once you start to get through that group stage. And listen, we all love to have a dark horse. We all love to see an underdog doing well. I must note, I think I mentioned it on our chat, that Cape Verde beat Serbia 3-0 in a friendly the other day, which was quite a result. That's a fantastic warm-up result for them as well. So listen, there might be a few surprises coming with the smaller nations for sure.
I think it was like the C team of Serbia, sadly. But listen, let's forget about that and let's hope for a surprise or two. And listen, more smaller nations means there's more chance of a surprise. Zander, do you believe that we will get that? We will get shock results, and we'll look back on this tournament afterward and say, why didn't we have 48 nations like years and years earlier? Because this is just so much better. Do you think it's going to go that way, or do you think actually just make it 16 again, like it was in the good old days of the Euros prior, and really just make it the creme de la creme?
I mean, Ian kind of mentioned actually, to be the tournament, this is the biggest competition in sport, as much as our post issue will tell you it's not. But to me personally, I think growing it has only been a positive for many countries around the world. I only feel for so many nations previously that were supporting their team, were passionate about their national team, and due to obviously the qualifiers, nothing wrong with their teams. It's just they're coming up against the real juggernauts in these qualifiers, and there was no way they were going to make it. And with everything expanding now, and with different qualifiers now being created, they get to back their national team with a real opportunity of actually reaching the World Cup, and that to me is one of the best parts about it. I mean, you James, you know me, I love a qualifier. I absolutely love a qualifier game when it comes to our European competitions, and I definitely love them when it comes to international competitions. And seeing an entirely brand new one out in the Oceania, which obviously we'll talk about when we get to that, and you see all the CONCACAF ones that were created specifically as well for the teams that were also mentioned as well already. That stuff gets me excited as a football fan, and I can only imagine how excited all those fans over there were, knowing that their national team really had a chance now of making it to a World Cup, and now that they're there, and the real goal is not only, I think, getting there and being excited that you're there for the first time. If this stays to 48 teams going forward, the real fun, the real excitement now is going to be, can you do it again? And can you continue to do it? Can your country develop with World Cup experience in it now? Which is mental to think about with some of these countries. Some of these countries only have maybe, domestic or continental cup experience. Some of them, even when you look at kind of like Cape Verde, for example, they've only really got kind of a decent amount of AFCON experience, but then now they get to look at their team and say this is good World Cup experience here, which is it's just incredible to think about. So I'm really excited about this being a 48 team tournament, and not sure about expanding it in the future. I know that there was a slight little talk of that again, but I think let's keep it like this for a while. Let's settle with it. I find this could go really well going forward, however.
Well, there's only one way to find out. But before we do that, let's get a sense of what we can expect from each of these groups. And we'll start alphabetically with Group A. As co-hosts, Mexico were drawn against South Africa, South Korea, and Czechia. Sadly, not South Czechia. That would have been some nice symmetry going on there. It's a repeat of an opener for the World Cup where Mexico take on South Africa. It's almost like a return leg from that tie from 16 years ago. Memories of that Sipiwe Chabalala goal to kick things off. Who will be the player that will forever be remembered as being the first goal scorer of the 2026 World Cup, I wonder? Zander, you have done a whole wheen of research on all of these groups. I'm interested in getting your sense of what things stood out for you when doing your research on Group A.
I absolutely did, yes. Probably a sad amount of research actually on all these teams, but I am just really excited about this tournament coming up. I did look at Mexico first and foremost. They are, of course, opening the tournament, so I thought I'd look at them as one of the host nations. There, very. I always found it to be a very interesting nation because it's such a passionate fan base that demands so much for a country that's seen its fair share of success, but I think it's fair to say last 6-7 years it's not been too amazing for Mexico at the moment. And you know, you can really tell that now. Of course, the Azteca in its own right is seemingly one of the hardest stadiums to ever go and play at. I haven't watched too much of Mexico at home to really get a sense of that, but seemingly it really is one of the most difficult stadiums to go and play. So I suppose they might have that going for them. I wonder if there is pressure of being one of the home nations in them as well. I'm curious how they'll handle that there. Very much excited to see Gilberto Mora in this tournament, 17 years of age, and he's played a lot of football for Mexico, plays out in the Mexico League, of course. I reckon he is going to look an absolute superstar in this tournament. I reckon this is the kind of summer where every single club in the world will be linked with this boy. I can guarantee it. He looks like an absolute wonder kid, and I think he will get some serious game time here for Mexico. Mexico, however, you know, I did mention the last 6 or 7 years has not been so great for them. They did actually win the Gold Cup. They beat Canada, of all teams. And so they are going to have a little bit of momentum that way. And come up against, I think, a really decent South African side who, for me, you know me. I'm a bit biased to South Africa at the moment. Absolutely love their domestic league over the last season there, and this will be, of course, their fourth ever World Cup. I'm just really happy to see them there. A lot of their squad built up from the domestic league. Really happy about that. I really like countries that just put real trust in their domestic league and want to take them into the biggest stage. That to me is absolutely excellent to see. For me, not a strong performance from the AFCON. I know we covered that as well. Kind of, you know, back when the AFCON was playing, I thought they could have done better, a lot better actually, to be honest. So I was really disappointed in their performance there. But I do think they have a high floor, South Africa. I do think there's a lot of exciting players there that could really turn them into a seriously difficult team to beat. Guys like Lyle Foster, Oswanapolis, Mbokazi, who is already playing over in the MLS, Mo Folking, who we've obviously mentioned on the pods before. I think there's a lot of exciting players for South Africa there. I'm really excited for that first game coming up because I think it could be a real good one. Obviously, you get your first half hour of nerves, etc., just for it being the first major game there, and I think it can really kick off, of course. Czechia, now, correct me if I'm wrong here, gents, but I believe this is their second ever World Cup known as Czechia. I believe that they have carried over the history of Czechoslovakia, so of course there'll be more appearances of the World Cup from there. I don't think this is a team many countries are going to worry about in this tournament. However, Italy should have their spot. So I mean, I Italy should have one of these spots. So I guess that's something we have to kind of discuss there. I think a huge low point for Czechia heading into this tournament was, of course, losing to the Faroe Islands. I remember we all kind of enjoyed that kind of underdog story from there. But they did take out Ireland and Denmark on pens to get here, which to me kind of comes across as a really mentally tough team, to be quite honest. Again, majority of their side is built from the domestic league. I should have mentioned as well for the Mexican side, a lot of them is built from the domestic league. You're going to see a real theme in Group A with this actually. A lot of players from the domestic league have been called up to kind of play in this group. And for me, I think in Czechia there, you've got Schick, of course. He's always the one you kind of look out for. I think the Czechia captain, Grechky, is always an exciting player to watch, especially in a Czechia shirt. And I thought it'll be quite nice for us to maybe even look back at the former Rangers man, Václav Černý, as well. I think that would have been a kind of fun, nice one to look at. Now, the last team in this group, and certainly not the least, I would say, is South Korea. They're actually our pot 2 team, believe it or not, from this group, actually. Often compared to Japan due to like their sudden rise in performances and getting results over the line. I've got to be honest, guys, I actually disagree with this heavily. Momentum from qualifying group in the friendlies has been pretty unconvincing for me, if I'm being honest. Heung-min Son isn't the player that he used to be. Kim Min-jae will play a big role for South Korea here, but he's not really that much of a player as much domestically. I think it's fair to say someone like Kang In-do, however, definitely an underrated cog in the PSG system. I think he's one that gets overlooked in that PSG team quite a bit. He's going to play a huge role here for South Korea, I believe, as well. Kind of plays within the shadows that kind of way. But there's going to be nowhere for him to hide in this group, of course. And again, this South Korean side, despite the players I just mentioned, a lot of their squad is built from the domestic league, and so a huge big group here full of many players that I don't think a lot of us are going to have heard of before. Maybe some of us are quite excited by just watching these new players, but this group to me could be a real underdog group in terms of giving you some serious quality and also kind of pushing you on towards thinking these leagues don't look too bad, putting them all together and putting them onto the biggest stage.
Iain, there's obviously some really interesting teams there, and I think exactly what Zander says in terms of so many players from their local domestic leagues, kind of being able to highlight that a bit. I'm surprised Zander didn't mention someone like Rela Bahili Mofokeng, who I know he's talked about in the past, and someone at Orlando Pirates, that this could well be quite an interesting group for him. But on the flip side of that, you've got someone like Guillermo Ochoa, who will be featuring in his 6th World Cup this summer for Mexico. And there's only 2 other players that can say that they'll be doing that. We may come on to them a bit later on. Mexico, as a host nation, will probably view themselves as the favourites for this group. They are a bit of a sleeper nation when it comes to World Cups in a lot of ways, because I feel like qualification for them is really easy because obviously they are really the dominant team in CONCACAF, and they always get out of the group, but then it's always that thing of that next step that's always a bit of a tricky one for them. I don't really see anything about this Mexico team that makes me think that anything will be any different, but they've had a kind draw, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and I think the home advantage is pretty crucial in terms of it. There's going to be a lot of expectation now. Again, I don't know the connotations of it. If anybody in the comments can correct me, or one of you gents can correct me, but if they were to qualify, then I don't know whether they would continue to play their knockout phase in Mexico. If they were to go into the USA, then whatever city they play in, they're likely to have quite a following there as well. We know there's a large Mexican diaspora in Canada and the USA, so they're certainly going to have support, and obviously that is drawn in, especially in the USA throughout the years. That Hispanic influence, especially Mexicans who've settled in the US as well, have brought soccer, football, certainly into the kind of forefront within US sport and culture as well. So I certainly think that'll be an advantage. Czech Republic's a funny one. It's again, they're one of these teams that there's nobody that really kind of Zander talked about there. There's nobody that really kind of stands out. For those that follow the EPL, you've also got Thomas Souček at West Ham. West Ham being relegated there as well. Even quite a steady performer for the Czech, for Czechia. Sorry to say the Czech Republic. But they don't. There's nobody that really kind of grabs the headlines. South Africa, I think, again, I followed their kind of performances Zander has within AFCON. They've struggled over the last couple of tournaments. I think it's fair to say. They've certainly struggled within qualification. I think they really kind of peaked in 2010 when they hosted the tournament. I think we can all remember that. You talked about that game, James, the opening game as well. Certainly we won't be missing those vuvuzelas come that first opening game as well, because I think we've all got sharp memories of that noise that just rung in your ears throughout, even when you went to bed. South Korea, I think, again, to me, a team where Zander said they're compared to Japan in terms of their kind of rise in terms of performances. You look at how they've qualified through the Asian qualifier groups, and they've always performed well. South Korea, I can remember back to the World Cup in Japan and South Korea in 2002. What a fantastic tournament that was. Really kind of they came from nowhere into that tournament as well and really announced themselves on the world stage. 24 years later, you're looking at a team where, as Zander said, okay, Son's not the player he was. He's obviously moved on from Spurs, but they've still got talent in there. And quite interestingly, when we were just talking through the squads there, you look at South Korea, they have that kind of half and half balance, even though they pull from the domestic league. They've got a lot of players that play in Europe, got a lot of experience under their belt. We're not talking about minor teams in Europe. You're talking about some of the big hitters as well. So I think they're going to carry a lot of experience into it. It's quite an intriguing group because there's so many different elements in there, with Mexico obviously being one of the host nations. I think it's going to be a very interesting one to follow. And I'll tell you what, I think it'll be a very difficult group to predict.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a good way of putting it at the end of it could go any which way. For me, I feel, host nation advantage does help in that way, but I think any combination thereafter is certainly possible. And folks, keep your minds open to what you think these groups are going to end up as we go, because when we get to talking about our predictions later on in the week, that's maybe where things can start to fall together a wee bit in that respect. But that is Group A. We'll move on to Group B, Zander. Another host nation in here in Canada. And oh boy, they have been given a very kind draw again for a host nation as well. They've been drawn alongside hosts of the last World Cup in Qatar, Switzerland in there as well, along with Bosnia and Herzegovina, who of course knocked out Italy in the playoff. Tell us about Group B.
Yep, absolutely. When we will start with the host nation again, there, Canada, their third ever World Cup. I personally would argue that their team this year is going to be worse than the one that qualified for Qatar, as you mentioned there. Home atmosphere, however, is absolutely fantastic in Canada. Quite very similar, you know, similar in passion to Mexico. Obviously not the same as Mexico. Mexico is just mental. It's absolutely not the same as that, but it's still absolutely fantastic. I think a massive player for Canada, funnily enough, was on loan at us. Of course he was. It was it's Derek Cornelius. He plays such a huge role for Canada. I think he is going again this year. I'll be very shocked if he wasn't, even with the long-term injury that he had that we all know about. So yeah, keep an eye on Canada and obviously on Cornelius, I suppose. We'll have a look at Qatar. This will be their second ever World Cup. Of course, they cheated in their first one by hosting it so they could qualify. Back-to-back Asian Cup winners, if anyone can believe that. It seems as though you put the Asian Cup in front of them and Qatar, they're a super team, and you put the World Cup in front of them and they are crap. Amalez Ali, I think, is one of their best players. Born in Sudan, of course. One of their other best players, of course, is Afif. He'll be making, in fact, he's already made 132 appearances for the country, which I think is absolutely a fantastic feat. And I wonder if he is going to be making more for Qatar this time round. Bosnia and Herzegovina, as you mentioned, James, huge upset against Italy there. Totally rebranded the entire kind of national team there with a goal of reaching the 2028 Euros, because they've, of course, never qualified for the Euros, as we know. But it was like they're way ahead of schedule here by, of course, qualifying for the World Cup. Little bit potentially of a sleeper team. I'm not sure about that. I'd be very curious on their performances here. It's always difficult to try and break down a team that's going there for the first time, massive chip on their shoulders. Switzerland made the round of 16, 4 out of the last 5 World Cups. Very similar to kind of Mexico there, actually, where they just can't seem to get any further. They can't seem to break that barrier in those knockout stages there. I reckon they're arguably the favourites to win this group, I would say. No Shaqiri feels wrong, by the way. You don't think of Switzerland without thinking of Xherdan Shaqiri, so it feels wrong that he won't be going there, which is a real shame. Because it's just the player you think of when you think of this nation. But of course, you do still have guys like Kobel, the goalkeeper, Elvedi, the centre half, and Bolo, of course, can give you a performance in striker. And so that's kind of my breakdown of Group B there for you. I'm not too sure. It could be one of those groups where you think, I'll catch a game or two, but I suppose you never know in these tournaments, do you?
You certainly don't. That's why we're here. Iain, I think Switzerland have won a watch with this, and yes, the pun is very much intended. It's a great draw for them. You could argue that Canada are, going to be happy with that as well. It could have been a lot worse for them in some respects, but yeah, this feels like a really, really good draw for Switzerland. And Bosnia, I mean, that whole story is great, particularly with Edin Dzeko getting to a World Cup in his 40s, giving that kind of Roger Milla kind of vibe, which I am a big fan of for that. But yeah, I can only see one winner here, and unlike in Group A, it's not the host nation this time.
No, I don't think so. I think certainly Switzerland's pedigree over those tournaments, as Zander talked about, they've got the experience under their belt. So I can only see one team, triumphing and obviously qualifying and getting first spot. But interestingly enough, you look through Canada, obviously talked about the link with Derek Cornelius. Canada have got a rich history of football. They've got a domestic league that works side by side with teams that play within the MLS, as we'll know, Toronto and Vancouver, but they've also got their own domestic scene. But a couple of players that will be familiar to listeners are obviously Derek Cornelius, that spell he had with us, Alistair Johnson that plays for them. And, it's a tournament I think is going to be fully embraced. I certainly think it will be the case. I think that there is a long history within Canada because of obviously the makeup of the country. It does have a lot of European heritage. It's obviously split in terms of its linguistics with, a big French population, French-speaking population. So I think there'll be a lot of energy behind Canada. Whether that translates onto the field and results will remain to be seen. Qatar is as Zander touched on, obviously quite strong within those cups as he talked about within the Asian groups. But you look at them as well; they've got a few naturalised Brazilians in there that have added to their kind of strength as well. Maybe capable of pulling off a shock result or two, but will remain to be seen. Bosnia to me is really interesting. A couple of things in there again for the listeners. You talked about Dzeko there. This is going to be his swan song. What a fantastic striker! What a fantastic career he's had. And then obviously from our viewpoint and a very biased Rangers viewpoint, we've got our own Nikola Katic, or formerly of our parish, who obviously switched from Croatia to Bosnia. I do believe he was born in Bosnia. He was a Bosnian Croat. So I think when it came around to getting that recognition, I think he used the rules that now exist within FIFA, where you can make a certain number of senior appearances for a nation and then look to switch. And he obviously invoked that as well and came into Bosnia. But I mean, they did it the hard way as well. I watched the playoff against Wales. It wasn't easy. It was a tough, slog for them to get there, but deservedly so. But yeah, I think you're right, James. I think when you look at the breakdown and makeup of that group, then it's pretty easy to predict where it's going to go.
I also want to just point out, also for Bosnia, Esmir Bayraktarevic, if that's how you say it. He's American, but has obviously got heritage in Bosnia, and he was the guy that scored the winning penalty in that shootout against Italy to take Bosnia and Herzegovina to the World Cup. No wonder kind of sort of coming back into, well, I guess close to his homeland. That might be something that elevates him a wee bit. He is already at PSV. I think he's got a very interesting career ahead of him. Into Group C, which is going to interest a lot of listeners, I would imagine. Shout out to you Brazilian listeners out there, as Brazil are obviously, that big nation in there, but they also have got Morocco, who had an excellent World Cup last time around in 2022, debutants in the World Cup in Haiti, and Zander, this other nation, this wee nation from just outside of continental Europe. I don't know if you've heard of them before. It's Scotland. We're back.
We are back indeed. Our first World Cup since 1998. I'm a bit biased here, James, but I would say probably the best qualifier run that we saw out of these qualifiers. Of course, one of the best goals ever in a qualifier from Scott McTominay, I would say as well. Try not to be too biased there. I won't dwell too much on Scotland here. I know that we have our resident Iain, of course, that will take on that. I think the players to watch for me, for anyone out there who is somehow listening to this and is, doesn't really know about Scotland. First of all, how did you come across this podcast? And second of all, if you're really really have no clue on the Scotland national team. I would keep an eye on Lawrence Shankland, Finlay Curtis, and Scott McTominay. Those would be my three to watch this tournament here. Looking at the other nations, of course, you did mention the tiny country of Brazil there. Never missed a World Cup. I'm not sure if that's going to be a shock to anybody, but they really are. When you think of the World Cup, you have to think of Brazil at this point. Genuinely never missed one. That they, of course, still have the most World Cups with 5 there. I thought they had a terrible qualifying group performance for their standards. I genuinely thought it was absolutely shocking from them. Of course, the Don has stepped in as their manager now, and there's absolutely some huge superstar players on that side. So definitely can't be writing them off ever, really, when it comes to Brazil. Haiti didn't play any of their home games, of course, at home due to some political conflict there. Obviously, we won't dwell too much on that, but they did still qualify, even not playing at home there. I would say players to watch kind of going into this one are maybe Bellegarde, obviously a former English Prem player, but he's now in the Championship, of course, with Wolves being relegated. And we'll quickly look at Morocco, of course, the first ever African team to reach the semis of a World Cup, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Massive chip on their shoulder for that, of course, there. I've got to be honest, gents. I don't believe they're the AFCON champions to me. We'll have to wait and see on the football and governing body for that one. Of course, all the controversy that came from that. I don't recognise them as my AFCON champions. I think they lost fair and square, but there you go. And I think, of course, the fact that they won the under-20s World Cup as well, the Moroccan under-20s team actually won their kind of World Cup side of things. I don't think anyone can sleep on this Morocco side. And if I to be quite bold here, gents, I know that we're not exactly going to be doing our predictions anytime soon, but if I were to be quite bold, gents, I think Morocco will take this group.
Interesting. We'll come to our resident Iain in a second for that take. Very hot take there from Bold Zander. But I think this is a great outcome of a group draw for Scotland personally, and I'd be interested in Iain's thoughts on this as well. First and foremost, I didn't want us to have any European nation because we play them all the time. I want something different, I want something unique, and I think we've got a perfect blend within that as well. There's challenges, but there's also a real opportunity for 3 points, and if you can win one game in the group, I think it gives you a really good chance of making it into the knockout stages. And Iain, if nothing else, we're up against teams that really cannot hit a penalty because Brahim Diaz will do a stupid Panenka and Gabriel will just shoot it miles over the bar. So it's all good.
It's a win-win scenario, isn't it? Oh boy, yeah, here we are again, Scotland in the World Cup. For those of us that are old enough, and I am certainly of that vintage to remember 1998 when that draw came out. I seen Morocco and Brazil. My heart kind of skipped a beat for a little bit. So yeah, I think we have some unfinished business with Brazil and Morocco. I think that's fair to say. But looking at the group, before I come to talk about Scotland quickly, and I will keep it brief because we're obviously going to a bit more depth about Scotland in the lead up to the tournament as well. Haiti, as Zander said, unfortunate situation for them due to the political situation in their home turf that they had to play every game away. But listen, they're their own merit. I don't think you can argue about that. Are they seen as maybe the cannon fodder of the group? Maybe. But for those who are listening who are old enough, never underestimate that. Let's think back to several tournaments that Scotland have been in when we've underestimated teams and thought they were going to be cannon fodder, and it's come back to squarely bite us on the arse. So we'll not be doing that or taking them lightly at all. It's obviously the group opener for Scotland. Brazil are straight. People talk about it's not a vintage Brazil team, and I don't think it is by any shape or form, but they certainly do have a manager who knows exactly what he's doing. I don't think that's in any doubt whatsoever. They've got key players in there that are still performing at a high level, across the various leagues, be that Brazilian domestic league or, the MLS within Europe. That it's Brazil at the end of the day. The aura that surrounds them as a team within the World Cup, I think, is unrivaled. We can't dismiss that. Morocco, I won't do the hot take that Zander just did there just now about them winning the group. I will say this: they're going to be a very strong team. Followed them obviously through AFCON. I think as we all did who are on this pod, we followed it quite closely, the tournament. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and my God, what a bit of entertainment they gave us in the final. But they've got a lot of good players, Morocco, a lot of understated players as well. So again, I think that they will be very tough opponents. Again, it's one of these groups where you could probably take 3 out of the 4 and go, right, okay, how's that going to work out? How's it going to work out is going to depend how Scotland perform. Now, I could go on and talk about the squad. I won't do that on this particular show. But what I will say is that the euphoria that's carried Scotland into this World Cup and into this particular group, hopefully that translates into this tournament. I think it will be heavily backed in terms of fans that are travelling. I know a lot of my friends that are going over. Unfortunately, I'm not going to make it. But guys who, to be fair to them, follow Scotland through the travel club and have accumulated enough points, and a few of my friends have got tickets. They're going to the games. They're absolutely buzzing. I hope they do take a wad of cash with them because they're going to need it. But certainly, we've got every opportunity here, and we've talked about potentially one win would be enough to get you through and qualify. One win and potentially a draw. I think Scotland are more than capable of that. I think with the squad that we've got, the loss of Billy Gilmour obviously at the weekend is a blow. The manager's made a very bold decision to bring Tyler Fletcher in. I think it's a massively bold decision. I can kind of see the logic in it to the extent that he was training with the squad and he came on in that game against Curacao, but I think it's a massive call. It's going to be very interesting to see how the manager sets up. We remember back to the last Euros. Again, I'm just going to keep this really brief. We just have to go for it. We're there. We're at the tournament. Let's shrug off the old Scottish adage of we got there. Let's actually go and make a real fist of it. Let's go and let's qualify. Let's try to go that little bit deeper. Let's give ourselves a real chance because, I know the times aren't great for the games. I know they're not. But it will be in a fantastic atmosphere. I'm old enough to the time I lived down in England during World Cups. I've lived in Scotland during World Cups and Euros. You've seen it the last Euros, what it does to the country as well. It galvanises it and everybody unites behind it. So, club allegiances go to one side. That is without a doubt in this tournament. You get behind Scotland, you get behind that Navy strip, and we give ourselves a real opportunity with this group. I don't see why not. I don't see why we can't do it. I don't see anything in front of me where I say, okay, I'm not saying we're going to go and scud Brazil. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we've got a real chance to get through this group.
And we should point out as well that we will have specific preview podcasts for the Scotland games, which Iain will of course be at the head of. So looking forward to that, and hopefully it can be more than just the 3 preview shows in that respect. And I think there's a very good chance in terms of that as well. That is for sure. Finally, for this episode, let's go to Group D, where we have the third and certainly biggest host nation in the form of the USA. And their group, Zander, contains the likes of Australia, Paraguay, and for so many people, the dark horse of any kind of international tournament, they are in Turkey or Turkey, I think is how you're meant to say that nowadays. Tell us about Group D and the players and things that you've noticed in your research that you think could make this quite an interesting group.
Absolutely will do for you. We'll start there with Australia. On their best run, I think, in their history. They seem to constantly be on an upward trajectory, which is weird for a country like them, kind of out of the way almost a little bit when you look at the world map. But they've been qualifying for the World Cup since 2006. And I find they have the ability to really punch above their weight, of course. Guys like Jackson Irvine and McGree, of course, are huge players for them. They do struggle with injuries, however. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one as well. Looking at Paraguay, they haven't qualified since 2010. Here's a nation, however, that I think has very much benefited from the expanded qualifying groups as well. You would also find that Arteta was their manager, given the absolute harambol that they played in the qualifiers here. Player to watch for them, of course, Alderete, Almiron, of course, that would be a name familiar to ourselves over in the UK, and Mr. Diego Gomez as well there. Turkey, absolutely. Well, my favourite thing here, I think, is going to be how FIFA are going to spell them throughout this entire World Cup, because I can absolutely guarantee you they're not going to spell it correctly. They are, of course, going for their third World Cup. That, of course, in their World Cup history there, you include the amazing run back in 2002, which is also mentioned before on the show. I think the real players to watch here are, of course, going to be Arda Güler and Yildiz, maybe even Koksu as well. I think those are very, very exciting players out there in Turkey. I think that could be a real fun one to watch, especially in the groups. I mean, I'll say right now, I think Arda Güler could be the player of the group in there. I think he's a very exciting player. Not biased at all, of course, being a Real Madrid fan. Now we'll go to USA, of course, the kind of last home nation here. Christian Pulisic has walked so that the rest of the talent pool could run. Momentum going into the tournament, not very strong, in my opinion. I'm not entirely convinced of the friendly sending into this. And I would say the players to watch for them right now are Adams and McKinney. I find their midfield is incredibly strong that way. I find those guys work really, really well with each other. So their midfield is going to be difficult to hit on the transition, hit on breaks and stuff. That one's going to be very interesting. Of course, Big Poch over there as well. He'll have things tucked up his sleeve for major tournaments. This could be a decent little group, actually, to be honest. There's some exciting players in here, I think. Some kind of standout players as well. I wouldn't be writing off Australia. I really wouldn't. I do think they punch above their weight quite a lot. And I reckon a good Paraguay and Turkey, that's just got a free drop written over it, doesn't it?
Oh, I'd take a game like that, especially if that was kind of early on in the tournament as well. I think we want that just for the tournament vibes. Iain, if I was being pressed on which of the three host nations I think is going to do the best out of this tournament, I'm probably going to go with the USA, and I'm not 100% sure why, because there's talented individuals within that team, but this has been a constant in the past with America, is that when it comes to tournament football as a team, you don't quite gel together. But could the difference maker this time, and the reason why they can, be in the dugout, one Maurizio Pochettino?
I think he can make the difference, James, and I think you've hit the deciding factor, that nail right on the head there. I think when they've qualified for tournaments in the past, they've had people like Bruce Arena has been the manager. They've had domestic managers. They've just not had that je ne sais quoi that a manager of Poch's standing can bring as well. I've seen that in the build up, when the squad is announced, he's taken a bit of flack, and he's already locked horns with some of the media in the US, who, despite the fact that the MLS has been going as long as it has, the American sporting press still don't have that deep understanding of football that you would get within Europe. So I think some of the choices he's made, he's felt he's had to justify. But certainly, when you look along, I'll use the American term here, the roster, not the squad. You look at the roster. You look at some of the experience those players have got, especially with those who play in European clubs. I think you're right. It's how do you take all those colours you've got in your palette and create a masterpiece? And I think that's what they're looking to do this tournament. I agree with you. I think that he's the deciding factor why they will go far. They've got real options on there as well. We've seen it. I've watched them in a couple of their warm-up games, seen a little bit of them as well. So I think they will go there. Paraguay, again, I agree with Zander. I think they've benefited from the extension of the tournament as well. You can't ever dismiss a South American team. They come with real guts, and they come with a lot of fire in the belly as well. So that'll be an interesting one. Turkey, I'm going to call them Turkey. Is it Turkey? Turkey? Right, anyway, listen, Turkey.
Turkey. Right, that's the rule. The rule for this summer's tournament, whenever we're talking about this nation, we're calling them Turkey. And if that's wrong, we apologise. But that's what we're doing.
Vastly experienced again. You look at the squad, they are experienced. Güler is obviously, performing at the highest level with Madrid. But again, you look across their squad, they've got talent in there. Draw a lot from their domestic league, as Anders pointed out as well. But they've got a lot of experience in there as well. And again, quite capable of going deep, I think, within the tournament itself. Australia is one that's kind of close to my heart. I lived in Australia. My wife's originally from Australia as well. I follow the team quite closely. Again, some kind of very bold decisions from Popovic, the coach, in the lead up to the tournament. Obviously, the one that domestically we all recognise was Martin Boyle getting cut for Volpato, who decided to switch from the Italian. I think he's had a senior cap, switched to Australia prior to the tournament. He's had no senior caps for Australia. So there's been a few ones in there. They have got experience from players. The majority of their players do play in Europe. They'll draw some players from the A-League, but the majority play in Europe. And obviously, for those who follow Scottish football, Cammy Devlin of Hearts is in the midfield as well. McGree, I think's injured. Zander, I think he's out the squad now, if I'm not mistaken. So Jackson Irvine, obviously, with St. Pauli, a lot of European experience there as well. For those that are Hamburg fans that listen to the pod, I'm sure you won't want to hear him talking about a St. Pauli player, but never mind. Australia are a funny one because they do have, if you've ever spent any time in Australia, football, and I did in the early 2000s, football has just continued to grow from strength to strength in Australia. And there is a lot of expectation in Australia from, for Australia to do well within this tournament. They quite regularly, obviously they came out a long time ago, a while ago, they came out the Oceania qualifying group because they were just scudding everybody in sight, get moved into the Asian qualifiers and have performed. You can't deny that. A few blips here and there, but certainly there. But that's another group that you'd be hard pressed to turn around and say, right, who's the favourite? You couldn't really turn around and say it. I think it's a bookie's dream because you wouldn't be looking and saying, right, in terms of it, you're going to, for those of you like a punt or a flutter, it's there's going to be a lot of games where you'll be getting 6-4s and 7-4s, and the bookies won't be able to predict it. So it's going to be a very, very interesting group. Very interesting.
Indeed. I think we've talked about 4 very interesting groups on this show, actually, and I think it really is a positive start to our previews, I would say, and in terms of these groups. Not had that many big hitters yet, but I think we will see that as time goes on. But we will leave it there for this first episode of the previews. Tomorrow we will be covering groups E through H, and we'll see where we get with that. My thanks for now to my 2 guests who will be back on the next show. First of all, Iain Campbell, thank you.
Thanks very much, James.
And to Zander staff, thank you.
Absolutely, James. Thanks for having me on.
We'll speak to you tomorrow. Until then, take care.
That was a Heart and Hand production.